Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show. Meet the trusted experts who will give you straight answers and will help guide you on the path of later life care. Now, here's your host, founder, caregiver, and CEO, Suzanne Newman.
And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders Radio Network, heard across the USA and on your favorite podcast channel. And how many of us are at a situation where we might feel some challenges in our life and our mental state, all things coming at us, and all of a sudden you reach a time in your life where you're thinking, I'm not as happy as I used to be. And this is a topic, I think, for anyone that has had challenges with depression or potentially working with people, for example, in care situations where they're depressed over their health, their different forms of wellness, they can't do what they used to do. And so I'm very proud to have on our show this week, and absolutely one of my favorite people in the world, Dr. Shawn Weiss. And Dr. Shawn, it's nice to have you back. It's been a while.
Thank you. It has. I'm glad to be here.
You've been so busy. You've been doing a big summit. You're amazing of all the things that you do.
Well, I just love spreading information. So that's
well,
good.
You're very good at it. So Shawn, I know you have a background in 26 years in healthcare and specifically working with older adults. And obviously, there's a lot of things happen when people get older, and depression is so prevalent. And I think it's a very important topic that we talk about today.
It is. And, being in healthcare for 26 years, primarily dealing with those over 65, there's some generational things with that too. And, it's still thought of as kind of like a stigma, right? And
right.
You don't want to tell anybody, you don't want to admit it. But it's so much more prevalent now. And one of the biggest statistics that I have is that there's been a 25% increase in the diagnosis of depression since 2020, since COVID, 25%. And that covers all age groups, but
that does not
it doesn't surprise me at all. It does not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And when we had that lockdown, for me being in home healthcare, we were not able to see our clients in certain settings. We were kind of locked out of seeing them. So, and they were isolated. So you had a lot of older individuals who became severely isolated. And there was definitely, we are seeing and still see the results of that inactivity and decreased socialization. The issues with cognitive impairment just went skyrocketing. So that statistic does not surprise me at all. 25% increase. Yeah. Right. And then you have caregivers of older adults. If you're a caregiver of an older adult over 50 years old, there's 50 to 70% are reporting signs and symptoms of depression.
And does not surprise me at all. We started the Therapy Dog organization. Excuse me, during that time. And, I am so grateful we did, because so many seniors to this day are having fear about going out in the world. There's all kinds of things that sound scary. Life has changed. And I've seen it in so many times. And obviously for a senior that may feel more isolated because they feel more vulnerable in their health maybe, or even mobility challenges, anything like that, obviously that can contribute greatly to depression.
That's right. And then, when we are taking care of somebody, sometimes, if it's you yourself, you're not always recognizing what's happening, right? And sometimes it takes somebody from the outside that knows you well, that is around you all the time, to kind of notice some changes and some signs that maybe you're trying to explain away, right? But, typically when you see somebody just kind of losing interest in activities that they previously enjoyed, maybe withdrawing from attending those types of activities or canceling plans at the last minute. I can name, I know people over the years, like, it's just, you can see that happening, and they might not see that themselves, and they might think that they're fine. But also they have a lot of increased fatigue. They maybe are taking more naps during the day, or getting up late, complaining of being tired, not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big one. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Changes in appetite, weight loss. Those are two big ones. Having significant weight loss. And people will think that that's something else. And you're just like, no, that's depression. That's depression talking. And, sometimes it's hard when you're in a senior care community and somebody's living there and you think, oh, well, it's part of aging, or these are, it's not depression, or mom's has cognitive impairment. So we're seeing those things too. There's a lot of overlying symptoms with that, but increased confusion's even a sign of depression. So, so many things, loss of social skills. They maybe are just because they've started isolating, they don't want to go out into groups or larger groups of people. I'm sure you've seen that in the people you encounter.
And it's interesting too, because when we have brought therapy dogs into communities, I'll never forget one visit that I went when I was visiting in a community with my dog, and the activity director said to me, "This lady that just was petting your dog, it's the first time I've seen her smile in like 6 months since she's lived here." And it's like, when you think about the sadness that they feel because they're so focused on what they don't have anymore. And the world is different, and it's an adjustment on top of it to go into like a senior living community. That must be huge. I can imagine.
It's traumatic. It really is a traumatic experience, and it brings up all kinds of emotions. And you think about usually the reason somebody is going into a senior care facility, whether that's independent living, assisted living, there's a reason for that typically, right? It's maybe they're having some memory issues and not remembering to take their meds, or just not safe to be by themselves. So you uproot, right? And then there's such a transition period, and it takes so much time, because then that, you might have a lot of feelings of frustration and anger towards your family. You might have behavioral issues, you might have outbursts, you might, you could go on for probably 4 to 6 weeks, they say, is a good transition period for somebody that's moving to where they really are not themselves, and they become very blue and they are withdrawing. And that's where, the people around them have to work on making sure you're advocating for participation and socialization and things like that. Now, and given you have some people that they're not social people, right? You can't make a social butterfly out of somebody who just never was before, or they're perfectly content being in their room. But the isolation certainly puts your risk level.
Right. And if you're seeing a dramatic change in your loved one, for example, if mom all of a sudden was a social person and all of a sudden she's pushing everybody away, that could be a real indicator.
Absolutely. You don't want to ignore those. Depression is a medical condition.
Right.
It's not a stigma, it's something that's very, very real, and it will precipitate and cause a kind of a vicious cycle of other things to occur. Right. And especially if you are over 65, once you start decreasing your social outings, once you decrease your activity levels and you start kind of isolating yourself, your activity level goes down. So what happens with that? Then your muscles start atrophying. You have decreased respiratory function. You have issues with your heart rate because you're not maintaining those health systems that are keeping you functioning at your optimal level. So it really is a cyclical effect. And so the quicker you recognize the symptoms and have the openness and willingness to do something about them, because it's very treatable.
Right. And so what are the things that people can do to, where do you start to start taking control of your life in that way?
Well, the first thing, you have to get an assessment. There are many wonderful standardized assessments. Just going to your primary care physician would be my first suggestion, because they will point you in the right direction. And, you also have to, then they start trying to rule out other things, right? And especially if you have somebody who has cognitive impairment, the thing that they're going to look at is like, okay, because there's so many, it's very difficult to diagnose because there are overlapping symptoms with cognitive impairment.
And I have heard, I don't know if this is true, but I have heard that depression can morph itself into dementia. Is that?
Well, yeah, there's a term called pseudo dementia. And so that's something that one of your healthcare providers will look at, kind of ways to rule out. So pseudo dementia is somebody that's actually, they believe is demented, but they're actually severely depressed. So, and they look at 3 different categories when they're looking at like a pseudo dementia. They're looking at their memory. They're looking at their executive functioning, and that would be like time management, organizational skills. And then they're looking at speech and language difficulties. So a lot of those can be played off as cognition deficits or memory decline or dementia when somebody's actually severely depressed. So that's where you do the screenings and you're really trying to weigh and pinpoint exactly what's happening. So the first thing is to get it assessed, and these are very standardized. Medicare has our standardized depression questionnaires that we do with everybody. And if you meet that criteria, then you really should do something about it. Medication is probably the first line of defense in depression, just simply because it just takes the edge off. It allows, and once you improve those symptoms, especially if you have cognitive impairment, you'll tend to see an improvement on the other side of that.
And the medication really just increases the serotonin, isn't that?
Absolutely.
Isn't
Absolutely. Yeah. They'll call them like happy pills, right? And I'm not an advocate for, like I said, I'm always going to say, well, I don't want to do medication, or that'll be the last resort. So, you want to definitely address the underlying causes of the depression. Is it a big life event? Is it a stressor that's triggering? I mean, you're going to dig a little bit deeper, and you can do that even in counseling. And a lot of people in that generation don't want to go to counseling, but there's so many things that you can identify. Like, I know, maybe there's been a death in the family, maybe there's been a major health diagnosis, all these things that can trigger just increased sadness.
Absolutely.
Really.
And the thing is, it's helping, therapy is really good because it allows your brain to process. And I think, it was interesting. I was watching the other night, Luke Russert wrote a book on grief, and the son of Tim Russert. And he talked about the fact that there are people, he did all this study, that go like they're in their 90s and they never processed grief. And our brains need that functionality. And I thought, wow, that was fascinating to me.
Because it's so true. But there's little things that you can do, besides, seeing your healthcare providers, and if it's you yourself that you're recognizing those symptoms in, or if it's somebody you're taking care of, you want to promote a routine. And it might mean you need to change their current routine. Maybe the current routine mom has is just not working, right? Like sleep until 10, not eating till 3. Like there's certain things, or, not taking their medications at the right time. There's certain things that you want definitely to have a routine with. And you want to include exercise in that routine. That is the number one best thing for depression and anxiety. It's been medically proven time and time again, is any type of activity. That could be a walk. That could be sitting in a chair and doing exercises. It is absolutely amazing for mental health. So exercise is one. Secondly is looking at your nutrition plan, decreasing the amount of processed foods, increasing, a more healthy plate. Because that could persist. But if you have a problem in your gut, if you have a lot of inflammation, there's a gut-brain connection. We've talked about that many times. So improving the nutrition plan. If somebody's in a residential care community, like in assisted living, then their meals are kind of made for them. But if you're still at home, or if you're living with a family member, then there's definitely something you can make changes with, right? And then simple things like gratitude, positivity, having a journal, doing meditation. Have you done grounding yet, Suzanne? Grounding has become one of my new things. Have you heard of grounding? Have you heard of that?
I know what being grounded is.
Well, grounding is a concept where they're doing more and more studies with it. And it's supposed to improve circulation. It's supposed to decrease inflammation. And it's basically, for instance, if I wanted to, take your shoes off and go walk in the grass.
Oh, yeah.
Go sit on the ground. They make actually mats for this now, like mats that you can purchase that ground you. But they suggest even 10 or 20 minutes of getting out into nature. If you're able to do it barefoot, or put your feet in the sand, or all those things, how that makes you feel, right? It brings a sense of calm to you. So that's one of the newer things I've started exploring that I think is really fascinating.
Well,
Yeah.
and I can probably equate it too. I have a rose garden. I love to dig in the dirt. There's something about being in my space and being around, when my rose bushes are in a flush and nurturing and being a part of the earth. I mean, to me is very healing. It's something that it's a wonderful distraction
It's
before.
so therapeutic. And so, again, another really good suggestion is to find something that you love to do.
Yes.
If it's not yourself, if it's somebody that you're taking care of, find something that they love to do,
Yes. Yes.
that triggers excitement and wants
Yeah.
they want to participate in. It could be a hobby. It could be going to church. It
Mm-hmm.
could be having tea with somebody. It could be reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, anything. There's so many things
Yeah.
that you have to dig in and find what brings you joy.
And I think that goes also for family caregivers. And I know for me, when I was taking care of my mom, I had a friend that I could call anytime and I could vent to her and we'd start laughing at some of the things that my mother would say because she had dementia. And it helped me so much because I had that relief. I had that ability to process that. And I think that's so important as well, to have a
there's a
circle
reason they
around you.
say laughter is the best medicine, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to have people that you can vent in, and you go into caregiver depression. I mean, that's a whole other story because it's so true. I mean,
Yeah.
you become in a bubble.
Right.
And, you're also isolating. You also don't have outlets. You also have a life that you're also trying to live outside of the,
Or you've let go
responsibilities of
of.
being a caregiver that you
Yeah.
let go of, and you start withdrawing and you start
Yeah.
isolating. And those are signs of symptoms of depression as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, having a group of people, whether it's a support group, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member that you can discuss things with, and kind of vent, it's super valuable.
So
And
important. So important.
it's so important.
And you know what? This is a very valuable topic for anyone, whether you're a professional caregiver, where or a senior, or whether a younger senior, you're dealing, maybe you've had a death of a spouse, anything. There's so many things that can trigger depression, and certainly not just exclusive for any one age group in this country, is it?
Oh, also, you know what else, Suzanne?
Yeah.
One of the things that technology has been good for, there's
Yes.
some things that, it can go both ways. There's some incredible apps now, like Headspace, Calm. Those are some great apps that help people handle depression, anxiety, all of those things, to help you with your mindset, because mindset is huge. So don't forget about the apps and the technology as well.
Shawn, this is so important, and thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We at Answers for Elders thank you for listening. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.